The wide receiver position is one of the most valuable positions in all of football, and a great wide receiver can be the difference between a terrible offense and an amazing one. Throughout the years, there have been incredible quarterback and wide receiver duos, some of which won championships and were immortalized in the history of the NFL forever. But today, I'm going to be talking about 6 wide receivers who are immortalized for a different reason, as they all cracked a mark that is almost unheard of: 300 plus receiving yards in a single game. If you want to see NFL content like this every single week, then subscribe to the channel. All of my socials will be in the description, so go check those out as well. I obviously uploaded a video last week, my first video on this channel, and you guys are absolutely blowing it up. So shout out to you guys for all of that. And of course, if you want to keep up with me, my socials will be down below in the description. And yeah, enjoy the video. On November 22nd, 1945, the Cleveland Rams played the Detroit Lions on a wonderful Thanksgiving Day, and Jim Benton went on to have a record-setting 303 yards in the game, winning a close game by 1 touchdown with a final score of 28-21. Benton became the first receiver to ever have a 300-yard receiving game, but he actually has a very notable career for one reason, and honestly, he has one of the craziest stories in NFL history, as he is still the only player to have an interception in the same game, as well as having 300 yards, and he is probably the only player who will ever do that in NFL history. And if it does happen, we'll all be long gone. That's for sure. And it was on the very first play of the game. And 2 years prior to that, in 1943, he was also on the Chicago Bears when Sid Luckman set the still standing 7 touchdown passes in a single game record. And he was the wide receiver 1 on that team. Finished the day with 2 receiving touchdowns, making him a part of 2 insane record-breaking NFL games. Benton was one of the pioneers of the wideout position and how it's played today, and he's going to be immortalized forever for for having 300 yards in a single NFL game. Cloyce Box of the Detroit Lions was the next player to break this 300-yard barrier, and he was actually only 2 yards short of breaking Benton's record from 5 years prior. But he had a much better game overall, as he finished the game with 4 touchdowns on the December 3rd evening, as well, which overall has to be one of, if not the best game by a wideout in NFL history. But one of the craziest things about this record is the fact that Box was drafted into the NFL as a running back, but after 1 year of 30 rushes, and those rushes only resulting in 62 yards, which is piss poor, for an average of 2.1 yards per carry, the Lions decided it would be a good idea to switch him to play wideout, and while Box was not a bad player, this game alone accounted for 11% of all of his receiving yards in his career in the NFL, and about 8% of every touchdown he ever scored in the NFL. But even though he was not an all-time great by any means, he'll forever be immortalized for this game he had on December 3rd, 1950. Stephone Page in 1985 had what could be argued to be the most impressive game on this entire list, as he finished the game with 309 yards, breaking Benton's 1945 record, and doing this on only 8 receptions, which is around 40 yards per catch, and almost every pass he caught was a deep ball. But funny enough, he only had 1 touchdown on the game, and it was on the very first opening drive for 56 yards. But was still getting deep on every reception, so that's pretty insane that he was only able to score 1 time. But what is even crazier about this game is that the 2 quarterbacks who played in the game, being Todd Blackledge and Bill Kenny, out of the combined 343 passing yards from the 2 QBs, 309 came from Paige, which is around 90% of the team's total air attack on the day. So you can quite literally say Paige carried the Chiefs' offense in this game and probably had one of the biggest carry jobs by a wideout in league history. I mean, 309 yards out of 343 in the air is just absolutely absurd. And obviously, 1985, the NFL was more run heavy, but I mean, 90% of the passing yards, and you're getting 309 receiving. It's just crazy. And probably, like I said, for a wideout, to carry an offense like that when you're really dependent on the quarterback play, it's just insane. So Stephone Page, 1985, probably one of the greatest deep threat games of all time. Willie Flipper Anderson holds the single game receiving yard record with 336 yards in a single game. But he did have the help of an overtime game, as he actually had under 300 in regulation, the only player on this list with under 300 in regulation. He finished with 296 at the end of regulation, but obviously he did go on to set the record with 2 receptions for an extra 40 yards in overtime on the game-winning drive to help the LA Rams beat the New Orleans Saints. That's actually funny as well, because that is a Sunday game that will be happening this week. LA Rams versus New Orleans Saints, so that is just funny. I just had to throw that in there because it's a crazy coincidence. But Anderson still holds this record today, even after 33 years have passed. And he can't really be too sure on how much longer it will last, as this is the greatest QB and wide receiver era we've ever had. And one of these duos we have in the NFL today could go crazy and have them a Sunday like Flipper did in 1989. So Flipper can never be too sure that this record is going to hold. But, I mean, 336 yards in a game, still the record, undeniable greatness. And he is going to be immortalized for as long as this record stands. You know, whenever you think of great wide receiver games, all-time great wide receiver games, you're going to think of Willie Flipper Anderson and his 336 yards. Calvin Johnson, known by many as Megatron, had his record for regulation time 329 yards in a game against the Dallas Cowboys that came down to the last second, and honestly could be regarded as one of the greater regular season games in the history of the NFL, as he was able to get these 329 yards off of some insane contested catches, even taking a short slant route 80 yards to the crib for 6. And Matt Stafford has a iconic, very memorable moment, fake spike where he ran it in for a touchdown with only 5 seconds left in the game to secure the win for the Lions in this game in 2013. And well, he's not the official holder of this record. He does have the most receiving yards in a game, not including overtime, in NFL history. And honestly, it's probably the most impressive visual performance on this list. That or maybe the next one I'll get to in a second. But like I said, you know, one of the first plays in the game, he takes a slant route 80 yards, 5-yard slant, 80 yards to the crib. Stafford obviously fake spike and ends up QB sneaking it. And this is honestly a great game in general, not just for Calvin Johnson, but of course one of the greatest wideouts in the NFL's history and one of the greatest wideout games in the history of the NFL. The 2016 Falcons were a remarkable team, to say the least. Everyone remembers them for the way that their season ended, and trust me, as a lifelong Patriots fan, I'm not downplaying how terrible that loss was. But a lot of the time, the rest of that year just gets overlooked by fans, the media, and everyone in the NFL space. But those Falcons were incredible. Matt Ryan won his one and only MVP, demolishing the NFL through the air with his running mate on the outside, Julio Jones. And on October 2nd, 2016, he had himself a game. 300 yards on the dot against the defending NFC champion Carolina Panthers and Cam Newton, where they scored a whopping 48 points on the division rival, and Jones had a touchdown late in the fourth quarter to seal the win for the Falcons. But Jones was easily one of the best wide receivers of his era, along with Johnson, Calvin Johnson, Megatron, y'all know him, and AB, Antonio Brown. He's had a rough last few years, but he was incredible in his prime. And Julio just had an insane game here. He was the last receiver to have a 300-yard game, and nobody has in the last 6 years. I mean, there's been some 200-yard games, but nobody has quite touched that 300-yard game. And I don't know when the next time we will see one is. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, hit that red button below and leave a like and comment, as it helps support the channel. And all of my social media links are down below, so if you're interested in keeping up with me, go check that out. And anyways, I'm out of here. Peace.